All right. I have played a lot of Chieftain at this point. I started a Chieftain. I brought it into in-game. I killed most of the bosses, everything but Uber. And the Chieftain was pretty great. I went ahead and ranked the Chieftain since I put so much time into it. And I've used all the nodes relatively extensively. The totem node is the only node I haven't used that extensively, but I did test it out. And here is the ranking. S, A, B, F, D, D, and C. Now, if I were to rank these before I played it, I would have put this exploding node at like an F, but it ended up being the best node on the Chieftain. So I'm going to go and explain some of my ranking, starting with the exploding node, the best node the Chieftain has. This 5% chance to explode does not feel like 5%, or maybe I don't understand what 5% is, but it seems to trigger a lot. And these explosions are not the normal kind of explosions I was expecting. These explosions are huge, and they do massive damage. They are boss-killing explosions. I was running maps with Delirium bosses, Beyond bosses, Essences, Metamorph. What else? There were other bosses in there. And then I took the Maven node, so it spawns extra bosses in the boss battles. With Delirium, so you get a Delirium monsters in the bosses' rooms, and you'd blow up the Delirium monsters on the bosses, and it killed the bosses. It was wiping screens. It was doing massive damage on big bosses. I was able to kill a couple Simulacrum bosses without even really fighting them, and that's like a 1 to 2 minute ordeal without the explosions. So if this said complete maps 30 seconds faster, this would already be an S tier node, and that's essentially what it does. Complete maps 30 seconds faster, depending on the type of map you're running. This is phenomenal. This is excellent. This is build defining. This is grade A node. I thought it was trash before I used it. After using it, this is grade A. This is grade S. This is S tier. This is one of the best nodes in the game, one of the funnest nodes in the game. S tier across the board. This is A tier. This node is very good as well. This allows you to only grab fire resistance. Now, if you're a min-maxer, this isn't going to be that exciting for you because you already, buy really expensive gear with perfectly rolled resistances. And some people might even like the resistance balance game where you have to cater your resistances, the wise oak users of the world. That ain't me. The ability to just grab fire and chaos is so liberating for me. So this is A tier for me. Unaffected by Ignite, I was a little down on that at first, but it's just a nice little add-on. And being unaffected by Ignite makes it a lot easier to just ignore the other ones. Shock is pretty bad. You can get some shock reduction. There's even a shock pantheon, so you grab that shock pantheon, and then you're no longer worried about shock. And then there's a freeze pantheon, or better yet, grab this node and move it over to the jug like I did, and then you're getting Ignite immunity. If I was to choose one elemental ailment to be immune to, it would probably be Ignite, because Ignite is the only one that really does damage. You can get shocked, but as long as you don't get hit again, that shock's not going to do any damage. The freeze isn't going to do any damage, but the Ignite is going to kill you. Ignite, bleed, and poison, those ones are going to kill you. So you're removing the Ignite. It's actually pretty nice. I like it. This is A tier. It would be S tier, but it really doesn't apply any damage. There's no damage benefit here. It's just defensive. And the fact that basically every Chieftain node is almost defensive, at least most of the good ones are defensive. The Totem node is defensive. This is defensive. This is defensive. And these are all trash, so we can just ignore these three here. And this is offensive, but awkward. We'll get to that one later. So A tier. This one, I don't really need to talk about it. A tier. You grab this node, and all you got to do is Purity of Fire, and you already are getting +5 to all res for just Purity of Fire. This is great. This is excellent. The Totem node is good. I don't really play Totems a lot. It's very defensive. I put it, what did I put it, B tier? I think I put it as a B tier. Yeah, I put it as a B tier. It's build defining. It's unique. It's defensive and powerful, and it's creative. I like it. It just needs damage. In order to move this to an S, and I get that every Ascendency can't have nothing but S tier nodes unless you're, a Pathfinder. Now, there's a couple deads in Pathfinder even. Anyways, I feel this should say something like deal 10% more damage when you are at maximum totems. Something like that to let you do more damage with totems. Or they can even throw a transverse That's not even a word. I just made up a word. A opposite effect in there. So you have totems summoned, and it could say something like deal 10% more damage with non-totem damage. So that way you summon your totems. Since this already has a defensive theme around it, with the damage taken by totems is recouped to you, totems regenerate life, and then totems are taunting, you can add 10% more damage to non-totem attacks. So let's say you're just using totems defensively, you're using the protector totem or whatever, and you're only using totems defensively, and you yourself are doing attacks. So let's say you want to grab these nodes here and then also totems. You could throw your totems out, and then your attacks are going to do more damage, but not more damage to the totems. Because a big problem with the totems is totems are able to scale damage because you can get more totems on the ground, and it's able to break a lot of systems. So they can't add more totem damage. They can't add that, but they can add more damage your main character does, which will give it a little bit more usability. Because if you just want to grab this, because right now the Chieftain is usually stuck at 3 nodes. So let's say you're doing the only type of build that isn't stuck at 3 nodes is an Ignite or a Righteous Fire type build, because you can grab this node, these nodes, and the Explosion node. Everybody should be grabbing the Explosion node. But if you're doing a Slam build and you go this way and this way, I mean, I guess you're loaded, but these nodes are just so bad that it feels kind of trash. So doing a Slam build, if this gave you 10% more damage while having a totem out, you can grab up these, you can grab there, and then you can grab here, and these totems will give you 10% more damage, but also provide a defensive layer. So this will open up more builds. So I think 10% more damage when you have maximum totems out, or just a totem out, but maximum totems is probably better. It's going to be a little nicer. It's going to move this up from a B to an A, and I think that's something they should do. But it is perfectly fine all on its own. Flames Advance. This is trash across the board, and it is so confusing. So the bottom part. Non-unique jewels causes small and notable passive skills in a large radius to also grant +3 strength. Why did they feel the need to have it non-unique? Is this so powerful that throwing a unique jewel in there is going to break something? Hell no. This is F tier across the board. If they got rid of the non-unique jewel, so you can use something like Might of the Meek or any of the unique jewels, it might move it up to D tier. And still almost nobody would grab it. The fact that they added this non-unique jewel is so weird. I think they were just afraid of potential interactions that could possibly happen. And the top part, non-unique jewels causes increases and reductions to other damage types in a large radius to be transformed to apply to fire. This is almost entirely useless. The good nodes that you would want to use that on, like this fire multiplier, this physical multiplier, you would want that to be converted to fire multiplier, but it doesn't work with multiplier. It only works with increases and reductions. And I believe they did that simply because they're lazy in coding and they don't have a lot of people working on it. And they already had a jewel that did this transformation thing. So they just took the properties of the jewel and they moved it over and said, hey, we're done. Lazy, 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 lazy. F tier, terrible. Now let's improve this. Let's improve this passive. It's not hard. Listen up, GGG. Top part. Just get rid of that. All damage is fire damage. All damage ignites. There you go. All damage is fire damage. All damage ignites. I don't care how they program it on the back end. Just make it fucking work. All damage you deal is fire damage. All damage ignites. That's going to move it to like a B tier. It's still not going to be that strong, but with this all damage ignites, you can build a solid ignite build, and you don't have to worry about grabbing ignite nodes. On top of that, it'll allow the explosions to always ignite, so it'll synergize super well. Now, the +3 strength thing, that's kind of nice, and it synergizes with tattoos. If they want this to synergize with tattoos, they can keep that strength node right there. Obviously, I would prefer them remove the non-unique section of it, because unique jewels are so powerful that this would actually make this a useful node. I mean, if they got rid of that non-unique, it's already a little more useful than it already is. But as it is, this is F tier. If I was making the game, it would literally be all damage is fire damage, including multipliers, including all of it. All of it is fire damage. You put on Death's Oath, that Death's Oath aura is now fire. Poisons are fire. Ignites are fire. It's all fire. Everything is fire. Just make it work. I don't care how you program it. All damage is fire damage. That would be a good node. That would be a build-defining node. That would be an interesting node. And also include all damage ignites. I don't think it'll be so overpowered that Chieftain becomes the #1 build across the board. I think it'll be perfectly in balance with other nodes. I mean, Aspect of Carnage is 40% more damage. Sure, you take 10% more damage as well, but that's easily mitigatable. This is nothing compared to that. This is probably the worst node in the game. To be honest, probably the worst node in the game. Easy to fix it. Easy to make a better node. I'm baffled by how bad this node is. I tested it out thoroughly, too. I was hoping that it would work really well up in this area, but things like, I knew it wouldn't, but things like spell damage don't convert. I had to test it because I was kind of dumbfounded at how bad this was, and I was like, there's no way it's going to work exactly like that other jewel did, and then it's not going to convert things like spell damage right here to fire damage. I thought they would at least modify it so it would be more useful, but they didn't. Now, the only real use for this damage conversion is if you're doing something like Brutus Lead Sprinkler, and you don't want to do physical convert to fire, and you go up here and you grab this that says physical damage, it's going to convert that to fire, so therefore you don't have to stack physical damage, you can only stack fire damage. But those nodes don't actually get reached. So, you know, I mean, you can do it with an axe, but most people who are Brutus Lead Sprinkler, that's a mace, so these axe nodes don't really work that well. So, yeah, it's just, oh, man, I don't know. I don't know what the hell. I think they gave it to one guy to do. He built it, and he tested it, and he's like, it works, but is it useful? Nah. All right, moving on. That's pretty trash. This is actually a pretty solid node. I think I gave it like a B. I gave it a C. I gave it a C tier only because it falls off in late game. Early game, this is actually like an A tier node because getting these -20 to resistances is pretty nice early on. So then you don't have to worry about curses or exposure, any of that kind of stuff. You just set this and then you run. You find a big boy boss and then you just stop moving. And you get -20 fire resistance while stationary. Fire damage over time. Now, I don't understand why they felt it necessary to be stationary. There's no other stationary mechanics in the game. So what they could do to turn this from a C tier to an A tier is simply add another tag underneath it that says you take no damage over time while stationary. So this will allow you to be stationary and actually capitalize on that. By removing the damage pools on the ground, the damage over time on the ground will allow this to actually work properly. Let's say you're fighting Maven and she throws those damage over time puddles on the ground, or you're fighting Sirius and he's got those damage over time on the ground nodes when he throws those things. Anyways, damage over time on the ground kind of wrecks this build because nobody can really survive damage over time without significant investment. Or instead of, remove damage over time, that'd be my preferred because I hate damage over time, mostly because I have a hard time visually seeing it because of all the visual cluster. I never know if I'm standing on damage over time until it's too late because I'm old and I'm slow. They could also just take 10% less damage while stationary. They need another stationary mechanic in this toolkit in order to make this useful and good and better than it is. It's still pretty useful. It's still pretty good. But by in-game, especially T16 clearing, you're not really stopping. And then you get the boots that make those little micro-explosions that apply -15 fire res from exposure. And it pretty much makes this passive useless. This passive falls off so hard on the in-game, and it doesn't really have to be. Also, they could just remove the stationary tag. Damage over time is enemies have -20 damage over time, fire resistance, period. I mean, I don't know why the stationary is there. Just remove that. I know they're trying to make stationary a thing, And at some point, stationary might be a thing, but as it currently stands, it's not a thing. I know GGG likes the slow drip feed mechanics. When they first introduced Impale, it kind of sucked, and then they slowly just started adding Impale stuff till it got up to speed, and then they kind of stopped adding Impale, except for the latest one, the Sandstorm, which gives spells the ability to impale, which is very good. So the stationary might get good in the future. A couple leagues from now, they might add a couple more stationary items. They might add a couple more stationary mechanics, and then this bumps up from C to B to A. But as it stands, there's not enough stationary mechanics. So what I would do to fix this is either remove the stationary or add in some type of stationary mechanics that help mitigate the downside of being stationary, because this game is not designed to be stationary. Having a stationary tag is like playing a first-person shooter game, and in that first-person shooter game, you're like, hey, how about we play Farmville instead? And you're like, no, I don't want to play Farmville. I'm in a first-person shooter. No, I don't want to be stationary. I'm running maps. I'm moving. I'm fighting a boss. I don't want to be stationary. This game is not designed around being stationary. So if you want stationary to be a thing, add more stationary mechanics. All right. That one is a C. Now let's move on to this one. This is a D, and this one is a D. I was a little hyped on this one. I thought it would be better than it is, but a level 30 Ancestral Call doesn't... Oh, I'm skipping. I'll do this one first. A level 30 Ancestral Call doesn't really add any damage. It just adds more strikes, and sometimes you can get a little bit more overlap, but that is not worthy of a Ascendency passive. It is just not good enough. It is D tier. It's not going to apply enough damage. It's not going to do enough stuff. And the fact that Fist of War and Ancestral Call, you can't use them both. It's either or, because if you're using a slam skill, you can't use Ancestral Call. If you're using a strike skill, you can't use Fist of War. So how to improve this with keeping it the same thing? They can allow this passive to have a gem socketed in it. And when you socket the gem in the passive, that gem then applies to your body armor. So you can choose which gem your body armor gets. That would be infinitely better. This would then be a B tier, because then you automatically get a 7-link. It's a free 7-link, and you could choose to use Ancestral Call, or you can use something else. You can do Righteous Fire, and you can get a 7-link Righteous Fire. I don't know what your 7th gem will be. Increased area of effect and concentrated effect, maybe. But either way, that's how you fix this node. Just to make it so you can grab a support gem and just socket it right into the skill tree, just like one of these sockets. You just get a free socket right here. And then if you want to make it even more interesting, you actually get a free socket here and then here. So it gives you a free socket node and then here. So you can socket a regular jewel here, and then you can socket a skill here, making it super fantastic and excellent. It does kill the strike theme, because you can socket anything you want in there. But, that'd be a good way to alleviate this very niche and limited use. Now, someone can probably get this to be all right if it wasn't for the node leading up to it. Trigger level 20, whatever, chosen when you attack with a non-vol slam or strike skill near an enemy. The problem with this is the only way it's useful is if you're doing a slow attacking build, and even then it's not very useful. Most builds want at least, like 3 to 4 attacks per second, and this has a 1-second cooldown, so they need to either remove that cooldown or lower it significantly from 1 second to 1/4 of a second, so you can get 4 of these in a second, or maybe increase the AoE of this, like this slam hits the ground and it hits like the whole screen, so it becomes like a screen clearing thing. They just need to improve this. It's just not good enough. When you put it on, you don't even notice it. At least I didn't notice it. Maybe early on, because I didn't level with this, you notice it. But T16 mapping, I turned this on and off, and I never even noticed. He would come out, he would strike people. It seemed like it did nothing. I didn't even notice it. Only reason I'm putting it as a D tier is because you might be able to work with it. You might be able to build some kind of build that makes this good. I don't know what it would be, but maybe it's possible. Maybe I should drop it to an F, but the fact that Flames Advance exists, and Flames Advance is so much worse than this, I have to put this at a D because Flames Advance is an F. If I move this to an F, then I got to move Flames Advance to like a Z. So what would I do to improve this? If you want to get lazy, just change the cooldown from 1 second to 0.25 seconds. But I don't think this is very interesting. I think Towaho's Chosen should be a totem that follows you around. A permanent totem that attacks, and maybe a totem you can put a skill on, or a totem that copies your skill. But it should be a permanent totem that summons and is always with you. It's like a totem ally, because that is perfectly thematic. And the totem could do slams, so it also gonna synergize with slams. So just make this a totem that follows you around and attacks with you. Maybe applies like a fire aura on you or something. Ooh, it'd be perfect. A fire aura that gives you 5% less fire damage taken and 30 fire res. And it's a totem. Something like that. It would be pretty great. Or since they love to do conditional shit, you can summon 2 different totems, and it switches every 4 seconds. One of them a defensive totem, one of them an offensive totem, to annoy people. Because, why have something that's stable when you have something that's unstable, unpredictable, and unenjoyable? But anyways, that is my Chieftain review. The overall Chieftain score for the new Chieftain Ascendency out of 100 gets a 65. 65 out of 100. It is a D flat, not a D minus, not a D plus. It's just a flat D. There's a lot of really good stuff to this kit, but this F and these 2 Ds really bring it down. And then this C doesn't really help that much. But this side of the table is pretty strong. This totem, it's a solid B. A lot of people are probably going to use it to build around some type of totems. And the new league mechanic, that taunt, is very good for the new league mechanic. And that taunt is just interesting in general. And I think they removed the taunt from a lot of different places. So, yeah, 65 out of 100. GGG could do better. They should have done better. These nodes are excellent. This one is S tier. They nailed Death's Fury. They nailed it. This is awesome. Everything else, not so much. Especially when you compare it to some of the other Ascendancies, including the Jug and Berserker, which are both in the same class, and they're both better than the Chieftain. Anyways, that is my Chieftain score. That is my Chieftain review, and that is how I would improve the Chieftain. Later.